I've actually been away for a couple of weeks, so I've not been on it. So I'm actually pretty excited to be here. And the other cool thing is that we don't have too terribly many images tonight, so we're actually going to be able to spend a little bit more time with each image, perhaps more than we always do. Thank you guys for joining us, and thanks for. What's that? Why am I getting a? Hey, Matt.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm hearing the recording in my ear.
Probably because you have the live stream open in another window.
Okay, let me take care of that.
You can mute it or close that window.
There we go.
I'd say with the Montana internet, close that window.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, it's done. All right. So tonight, Chris is with me. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming.
Indeed.
You all right there, Tim?
Yeah. It was really discombobulating because I was hearing my own voice like 30 seconds ago, and I wasn't able to make it right. I wasn't sure if I was talking or not, but I think I'm okay.
It's like you went back in time and are revisiting yourself.
Sue's coming in right now.
Nobody wants to do that. Excellent. Okay. Hey, Sue.
Hey,
welcome.
Sue.
Let's see if she's.
Okay.
It was really discombobulating. She's connected and she's not.
Her
muted.
audio's on.
Okay. Sue, can you hear us? Hey, there you are.
Hey,
Hi,
Sue.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So many of you guys have been with us before, so you kind of already know the drill. You've submitted your images, and we're going to take a look at them, and we're going to do it much in the vein that we do during our workshops, which is when the image pops up, we'll analyze it and look for good things, look for things that can use improvement, and talk about many different things from composition to field technique to maybe the lens or positioning, all the way down to processing of the image. But one thing I'd like to ask you guys is if you have a specific question, if you put the image in for a specific reason, please let us know, and then we can address that straight away. And we could target your review a little bit better in that way. If you don't have any questions, then Chris and I will just look it over and kind of think about it and start making words. All right. So did anybody put an image in with specific questions?
I did.
Okay, Sue, excellent. Well, so speak up when they come around then for sure, okay?
Yes.
What we'll have you guys do is once we get started, we'll have you all mute your mics in case there's any background noise. It won't interfere with the image review. So if you want to talk, then remember to unmute your mic, okay? And what am I missing, Chris?
I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for you folks out there in YouTube world that are joining us, thanks for being here. We appreciate you coming by and hope you enjoy what we're about to do. And keep your eyes open to our Facebook page and Twitter feed, right, Chris? For invitations to
Facebook and Twitter. And if you want to just visit the website npan.co/image review, and you can leave a couple images right there for us. And we cut it off about noon on Thursday. So anything you want to submit, just drop it there, and we'll do the review that night.
All right. So with that, I guess we'll get everybody to mute themselves, and we will jump into the review. Chris, I'll start off, share my screen first. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, go. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen, and Chris, I just want you to give me a confirmation that you are indeed seeing my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to start off with this one. This is Don's image, and let me go into the develop module. And ooh, that's quite nice. All right. Let me just zoom in here. Okay, Don, let me take a look at the information that you've got here. So it's 20 seconds at 2.8 ISO 3200 with the 16 millimeter lens, 11 to 16. Okay, so first of all, I love the black and white. We see so much color photographs of the night sky, and of course they're beautiful. But the black and white to me is always very alluring and beautiful. And I like the tones in here, Don. You know, you've reached some rich blacks down in here, as we can see in our histogram. You've reached some deep blacks and you've got some bright whites, so your histogram looks pretty good. And the overall tonal structure looks okay. I think it looks pretty good. We might want to come in and maybe add a few more mid-tones by brightening up the exposure just a little bit or bringing up the shadows just a touch. So we're starting to spread out some of those tones. So if we look at the before and after with that one, we've gone from that to that. It's ever so subtle, but you're just starting to ring out a few more of those gray values in the image. Compositionally, I think it works nice. In a perfect world, and I don't even know if this is possible, but Don, you see where this branch comes down here and obscures this other tree. I think if there's no way around it, that's a pretty good job there. But let's say, for example, you could have moved, 2 feet forward and 3 feet to the left or something. That would have put this branch in this area. And by showing some more of those background trees, what we're going to start to do is get more depth and make the image look less two-dimensional. Again, sometimes we can't do these things. So just remember, in an image review, we're kind of highlighting things that in a perfect world, if we could have done them, then that's what we'll do in the future. So watch for those things. We call them tight mergers. And let's see, this is in Joshua Tree or something. Yeah, I'm really liking this. The only other thing is the stars are not quite sharp. And that could be one of two things. And perhaps you didn't even want the star sharp, and that's okay too. But typically when we're including this night sky like this, we like to see our star sharp. And I completely understand if that was your intention. That's an artistic decision. But let's assume that you did want them sharp. Then what is probably happening is that you're super sharp right here. So you probably focused on the tree. And at 2.8 over here, it wasn't quite enough depth of field to get from here sharp all the way to the stars sharp. So in this case, what we could do is look to our Photo Pills app and plug in the exact camera that we're using and the aperture, and that'll tell us precisely where to focus. And it was probably just a little bit past that tree. And then hopefully with a 16 millimeter lens at 2.8, you should be able to get the tree sharp all the way back to the stars. But aside from that, everything else looks good. I would just say again, by opening up those shadows just a little bit, we're going to start to bring a little bit more subtlety throughout those grays. And I think you can see that again, show you that before and after. So that's where we started and that's where we ended up. And we're still retaining a deep black, and the overall look of the image kind of feels the same, but we just brought those shadows up. Again, making more variant in that gray value in there. Yeah, really, really nicely done. It's over to you, Chris.
Okay. All right. So what do we have here? This is Joe, right?
Yep.
Yeah. How's it going, Joe?
Not too bad.
Where'd you shoot this?
This was Skyline Drive, part of Shenandoah National Park.
Oh, all right, cool.
Great.
And this was a year ago. I saw the April 27th and got excited. I'm like, oh, you got outside. This is from last year.
Yeah, I wish I just checked that the park's closed.
Yeah. I heard there were even the local police are getting involved, trying to keep people from getting in, just to discourage people from being in the nearby towns. But anyway, okay, well, it's a great spot to shoot, and yeah, nice job on this. People don't really think of the East Coast as a Milky Way spot, but it absolutely is, especially if you get up there in the parks, the Blue Ridge Parkway and Shenandoah and all along in that corridor. So the first thing I notice here is I love the clouds. A lot of people will avoid getting out and shooting, doing night photography when there's clouds out, but it can be really dynamic if you work with them right. And here they do a nice job of framing the Milky Way, but I love that effect of getting the sort of the dark underbelly of the clouds with the stars behind it. So nice capture and way to stay out there in conditions where not everybody would have. I kind of go back and forth on the branch up here. On the one hand, I usually would avoid this, but I do recognize, and I'd be curious if this is what you were thinking. So normally I would avoid this because it's kind of just coming out of nowhere, but I do recognize that it mirrors sort of the shape of the clouds on the right that are coming in too. And I was wondering if you did that on purpose.
I don't recall. I don't think it was on purpose necessarily, but I was kind of, there's limited viewpoints in this particular spot. They were happened to be right next to me, so
okay,
I worked with it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because I could see it working. That if that was your intent, I think you could have maybe worked it a little more to make that obvious. But anyway, okay, so just leave that as a side note. So the Milky Way itself looks pretty good, but I'd be curious about a couple of things. I gotta move everybody's pictures away from my develop module. Okay, so let's see, we're at 2750 here. I usually shoot the Milky Way at 3850. How does that look? That's maybe not quite enough blue in the sky, but honestly, I'm a little colorblind, so I try not to get away from the numbers that I know. But 3850 usually does a good job of bringing out a little more color in the Milky Way itself and kind of getting the color on the clouds there. So I think I would probably go a little bit cooler on this. But like I said, I'm colorblind, so I would only get away from the white balance color values that I know if somebody's available to help me, which Tim will tell you is usually him. But like Tim, how do you feel? This should be just a little bit cooler?
Yeah, well, I think, I do feel that. You're exactly right. And it's because you're so close to city lights or man-made lights that it is causing some light pollution in the sky, and so I think your lower value to begin with was right on the mark.
Oh yeah, you think so?
Yep.
Okay.
Maybe a
All
little
right.
bit too blue. Yeah, you could probably pump it up a little bit from there, a little bit more yellow, but you're in the ballpark, Joe. So you were doing the right thing.
Great.
Yeah, like right there is just about perfect.
Okay. So one other thing I do, so the Milky Way looks pretty good, but my hunch is if we come in and add a little bit of the haze, it's gonna just punch that up just a little bit. And you can see the difference there. I might even go just a little bit more aggressive with that. And then maybe just a tad bit of texture. Again, just to get a little bit of punch in here. Oh, this is interesting. You get just a little bit of coma in here. Not enough to ruin the image. I'm just noticing it. What's your lens here? That's the Tamron 15-30?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Have you seen that before at 2.8?
I have seen that, and I think actually I might have shot this one. I'm not sure if it was intentionally or not. If it was at 3.2, maybe that's the other image. Is that
Okay. Yeah, I don't use this lens. I know Lance loves this lens, and I'd be curious to know if he closes down at all, if he sees this. Like I said, I don't think it's an offensive amount of coma. I just happened to notice it when I zoomed in. So aside from a little bit of touch up to the Milky Way, the one thing I see here is this in the corner. Do you remember what this was? Is this just a rock?
Yeah, it's just a rock. And I think at the time I might have been trying to light paint it, but when I got back, I realized that it wasn't in focus. So
okay.
I tried to tone it down.
Yeah. Okay. I would come in and see if I could do an easy edit to get rid of. I'm just going to do like a sloppy painting job here, and let's see if we bring down the blacks a little bit. Yeah, that's really easy to knock out. It was sloppy. I'll go touch it up again right here, but I think it just makes the image look just a little bit cleaner, right? Because that wasn't really contributing to the composition.
Right.
So I think it was just a little distracting. I think, your instinct to try to light something in the foreground was good. But I think you were right to leave it alone because it was out of focus once you saw it on the computer. And I would just knock it out completely because, it's either helping or hurting. And in this case, it wasn't helping. So, I think the only other thing I would do is I would consider these lights right here. I would consider just cloning these out. Just to keep the focus on the city line in the background, and get rid of those. I'll just do a dirty edit and see what it looks like. Well, oops, where's the, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like I said, the only other thing I would do is maybe just come in and play with the Milky Way and try to just punch that up a little bit using dehaze and texture. Yeah, I like the juxtaposition of the color tones here between the light pollution and the sky too. And I say this all the time. People say, "Oh, what do we do about light pollution?" And you can use it creatively, and you did that here. Like I love that color combination and that separation between earth and sky. So this was good. Nice work.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go, Tip. Tim, are you muted?
Yeah, I was. I'm actually going to skip over Martha because I'm texting with her right now and she's trying to get in. So, so we'll come back to that one. Okay, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll jump to Kathy. And is everybody seeing my screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Chris? Yeah, Joe, thank you. Okay.
Oh,
and Chris,
yeah.
if you could just keep an eye on the participants window, because I'm trying to get Martha signed in through the participants window in Zoom.
Sure.
All right. Okay, cool. So yay, Kathy.
So a little background on this, I wasn't quite sure what I should submit, what file format, because this is actually a composite of
okay.
4 light painted frames,
Nice.
plus a little Lightroom work after the fact.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad you did that. I'm just thinking fondly back to the days when we used to teach Photoshop together. Okay, so why don't you tell me, Kathy, about the 4 frames that you put together?
So I lit the cab in the front of the truck in one shot. I lit the back gate part of the truck in a second shot. I lit the wheels in a third shot, and then I ran the flashlight across the ground for a 4th shot.
Okay, and were you camera right when you were putting the light across the ground?
Yes, I believe so. It was last October, so I might not remember completely.
Okay.
And all of that was good, but once I composited it, I realized that I couldn't separate the truck from the hill behind it. So I used an adjustment brush in Lightroom to open up the shadows on sort of the right side of the truck as we're facing it, and back
right over in here.
Yep, and then back towards the cab. Because I had not painted that sufficiently. So it was just you couldn't see it. It just sort of fell off into the darkness. So
Gotcha. And so what you're hearing, everybody, is talking about painting from many different angles, which I'm a huge fan of. And one of the ways that you can deal with this, Kathy, is by can you see my mouse moving around on the screen?
I can.
Okay, so one of the ways you can get around it, and I think you already know this, is by like standing right here. And what I would almost always do is do a severe kind of backlight or heavy side light. And so, so I would literally stand right here with my back to the camera, holding the flashlight in front of me, and then kind of paint the truck like that. So the light is coming in at this angle here. And And so what we can see here is the light on the truck is mostly kind of from the front, from this side over here. I can see the shadow of the wheel well. So you've painted light in this way, and that's putting light in here. And that's nice because you're at an angle. Not sure where you painted this. Let's see if we can figure that out. From the right-hand side again.
Yeah.
Because it's brighter on this edge here than it is there. So that I would assume the light's coming from that angle on the back of the truck. And then the light in the wheel well was painted from this side, I'm assuming. So you were here painting in that way, and you can tell by the shadow being cast by here, and it's a little bit brighter on this edge. And then for this one, that one's a little
like straight on from that one.
Yeah. So I would say, you know, breaking that up into 4 different lighting sections is great. And I would do the same thing. I would, however, add in the standing over here, almost like, you know, a little bit beyond the truck. So you're almost backlighting it. And then that's going to be your brightest light, Kathy. So imagine that being your key light in the studio, right? Or your hair light, you know, so it's going to be much more powerful than everything else. And that is going to send, you know, that's going to help separate the background or that edge from the truck. It's going to have that edge glow, just like, you know, we do in the studio with people's hair. And yeah. And then what I may have done would have been to continue to paint this truck from this side as you did, but actually maybe spend a little bit more time in the front. And then as you're bringing your flashlight over, kind of fade it off as you go into this direction. So the brightest part will be here, and it'll get darker and darker just through the time spent with your flashlight on the truck. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think so.
Yeah. So, you know, if I'm painting the front of the truck, I'm painting, and then go off to the side and then just sort of fade it out. And then,
gotcha.
You know, you know what I mean? And then this will be the brightest area, because right now the brightest area is right here. And this is arguably not as interesting as the front.
Right.
So again,
I've done very little light painting. Like I went to Bannock to do this last year. And so I painted this truck twice, 2 different sets, and this was the better version.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, it's a good job, and you're moving and going in different directions. And I think you can start to see how, like, the biggest difference I'm seeing is how this wheel is different than the front of the truck. Can you see that?
Yes.
And it's different because you painted it at a different angle.
Right.
And this kind of looks the same as the truck because it's painted at the same angle. So by using multiple angles with your flashlight, then you're going to create more drama in the image. And so I pretty much take these single subjects and treat them as somebody in a studio and say, okay, there's going to be some backlight, there's going to be a main light, and there's going to be a fill light. And then what we can also do is all the little accents like you've done on the tires and the rims and stuff, and the ground as well. And with the ground, just remember to keep that flashlight as low as you can. So wherever your flashlight is closest to the ground, it's going to be very bright. So for painting this area, what I may have done was stood way off to the camera left, so that the brightest part of the flashlight hitting the ground is outside of the camera's view. But then I'll have my camera about maybe 6 inches off the ground and just kind of swipe along just like that as you're painting. So very low angle, and just watch the brightness. You'll see how it'll be much brighter near the flashlight than it is further away from the flashlight. So you try to get it out that way.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. It was getting so dark I couldn't see my tripod. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these are the trials and tribulations, right, of light painting. But awesome. I'm so glad you got into it.
Thanks, Tim. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Good, Kathy. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, Chris, back to you. And hi, Martha. All right. So Chris, you're muted. And
there we go. Hey, Martha.
you want to jump on Martha's now while she's here?
Yeah, because we just passed it. So let's go. So Martha, you're muted. You had a specific question about dark frame subtraction, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what it's called.
Dark frame subtraction, right? So it's actually pretty easy. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, dark frame subtraction is a way of dealing with long exposure noise. And if you're not familiar with that, well, it's so when you run a long exposure, you can get hot pixels in the frame, and the warmer the temperature is, or the drier the conditions are, the more long exposure noise you'll get. And one of the ways to deal with it is using long exposure noise reduction in camera, but that on most cameras, that doubles the time of your exposure. So if you run a 1 hour exposure, then you got 1 hour of long exposure noise reduction to run after that. So it's pretty time consuming. And it's also impossible to do if you're image stacking, right? So if you were doing, say, a star stack, you can't run long exposure noise reduction because after every 2 minute exposure, you're going to get a 2 minute gap while the camera's doing the noise reduction. So there are circumstances when it's better to use this method, dark frame subtraction. And essentially what you do is when you're done shooting, you shoot another blank frame. You just put on your lens cap and shoot another frame at the exact same exposure. So why would this be better? Well, in one case, the image stacking, right? So I could shoot, my 60 2-minute exposures, and then at the end, put on my lens cap and shoot one more 2-minute exposure that's just black. Another example might be, say I'm doing a 15-minute exposure and I'm trying different light painting, and I don't know which one I'm going to use. Maybe I shoot 4 different variations of the light painting. Well, now at the end, I can shoot one dark frame for 15 minutes, and then whatever version of my light painting I decide to use when I get into post-production, now I could use the dark frame to get rid of the long exposure noise. So the reason this works is because when you shoot that dark frame, whatever long exposure noise you've been generating with that exposure, the camera is going to generate the same thing. But because your lens cap is on, the only information you're going to see are those hot pixels. And I'll show you. This is Martha's dark frame. And if we zoom in, you can see those are the hot pixels that she was getting in that particular circumstance, right? So if we go back and look at her frame here, if we zoom in, we'd see those hot pixels in the exact same places. Now, this isn't that bad. This long exposure noise, you could deal with this just by cloning out these hot pixels. It wouldn't take that much work.
There were also some, like, a lot of white little speckles that I was seeing.
Yeah.
And I zoomed in to just the dark spots. There were just a lot of little white specks.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely seeing these.
Yeah, definitely.
But the point I was going to make is that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes you've got so much long exposure noise that it would just be a nightmare and just tedious to try to spot them all out. But I could show you this will work. Okay. The dark frame subtraction will absolutely work here.
Okay.
So this is kind of similar to doing, it's basically an image stack. What we're going to do is we're going to bring both of these into Photoshop, and by changing the blend mode to subtract, it's going to find all these hot pixels and remove them from the image. So we select both images in Lightroom, and then we come to Photo, Edit in, Open as layers in Photoshop. And you can see my flight plans. There you go. All right. So you can see Photoshop is loading both of those photos, and over here in the layers panel at the right, you can see that it's placed the main image up on top.
Chris?
Yeah.
Actually, we're still are using two screens.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to stop the share and start the share again.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for mentioning that.
Sure.
Okay. So here it's brought it into Photoshop, and it's put the primary photo, the on top, and the dark frame is underneath. We actually want that the other way around. So I'm gonna click on the dark frame and I'm gonna pull it up on top in the layer panel. And then the only other thing to do is to change the blend mode to subtract. And what subtract does is it looks for light pixels and then it subtracts them from the layer underneath, essentially. The brighter the pixel it is, the more it'll subtract from that bottom layer, and black, it has no effect. So that's why this works, because all those hot pixels are exactly what the subtract mode is looking for. And because it ignores black, then anything that's beneath the black pixels is going to show through.
Gotcha.
So let me zoom in, because if I do it like this, you're not going to see it very well. Let's zoom in and find. So here are some hot. So here's a good example of some hot pixels. Now, when I come over, I've got the dark frame layer selected, and I change the mode to subtract, and you see it got rid of them. Right.
Cool.
So here, if I turn that off, so I just turned off that dark frame, you can see where all those hot pixels are, and I turn that back on, and they all go away.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's
And
one
so
of those
if I
things.
do a stack, at what point do I use that? Before or after I've stacked the whole thing?
After.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you were to do your stack, there's a couple ways you could do it. You could do the stack and then flatten the image, and then put this on top of that one flattened layer. Or you could take your stacked layers and put them in a group, and then if you put the dark frame on a layer above that group and change the mode to subtract, that should do it.
Okay.
As well.
Okay. Easy enough.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks for doing that. I've been wondering about that for quite some time. Didn't realize how easy it actually was.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like sounds complex until you actually go in and do it, and then it's that's it.
It's easy as star stacking. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like magic.
All right. Sue, is this one of the ones that you had questions about?
Actually, it's the other one, but
okay.
This one I just was playing. I was up on a Hall Mountain lookout, looking out over the town.
Mm-hmm.
I did add some exposure because it was really dark, but it was because
did you light paint in here?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So we're at 8 seconds at f4 ISO 100. So I'm seeing quite a bit of grain in here, or noise, and I think that's probably because you cranked the exposure to +3. Okay, so is there a reason that you went at 8 seconds rather? What lens were you using here?
It would probably be the let's see, what have I got up there? Either the IREX.
Okay. 15 millimeter.
Yeah, 15 millimeter is the IREX.
Okay, so at 15 millimeter, for star points, you probably could have gotten a little bit longer of an exposure. You're on a full frame, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe Chris can chime in on what that exposure is, but I think that's probably closer to 14 seconds or something like that.
I think part of the reason I was doing that was because of the moon. This is just a single shot.
Okay. All right. So you're at 8 seconds at f4. Okay. So in this case, I think what we're seeing is the moon is pretty much blown out anyway. If you do give it another stop, yes, you would have lost a little bit of the star point. So by keeping your exposure shorter, you kept the outside of the moon from overexposing. But at the same time, then what you did was you made it so that you had to crank up your exposure to +3 to get information. So let me just put this back to 0, and that's really what it looks like in order to get that moon. And that's a pretty short exposure, right? So I'm thinking, if you could have gone up to 14 seconds or so, that would have been at least been twice as much light. So, we could go in here and add a whole other stop of light with the exposure at +1 at that point. And then, then I think you're closer to the range there. But even at +2, I think, yeah, there we go, at +2, I think that works out pretty well. And the shadows are left still dark, that extra noise from lifting them up is not so, is not so bad. Now, the other thing you can do is you could also bring down your shadows a little bit and increase your exposure a little bit more. And that's going to make your trees still a little bit darker. And we're almost up to that 0.3 now where we were before into the sky. And seeing that grain or the noise in the sky, that doesn't really bother me. We're just so used to seeing it when we shoot those star points, right? I think it's just lifting the exposure up so much on the lower part of the photograph that makes it more obvious that the noise is there. And I think, compositionally, what I would do, Sue, is I'd probably come in and crop a little bit, because this tree is an anchor on the right-hand side of the frame, but then this tree from here on over is a big gap, right? So if we, so if we go into our crop and uncheck our little lock here, by bringing this over, and I'm going to hit L, the L key a couple of times to go into lights out. And I find that helps me crop an image without the other, everything else around the outside. So I think coming in like this, notice how when this tree is to the left-hand side here, a little bit closer to the edge, it feels like there's a tree on the right, tree on the left, and it all kind of feels contained, right? And so at that point, you could leave it like that, or, if you wanted to bring more attention to the moon, then you could bring it back closer to 2:3 aspect ratio, which is probably going to be close to that. And, if you wanted it to be a solid 2:3, then at this point, you could just say, hey, let's turn that in by clicking on the custom. You could just go to the 2:3 and it'll bring it very close to that final. Right. And so I think that's going to feel a little bit better in this case. And look, the trees, you can see they're a little bit darker than they were, but I think that's okay. And I would probably go in and I think I would clone out some of these or all of these little white spots. And that's going to bring in, again, much more attention to, to our moon in itself. So just by going there, I won't do them all, but just give you the idea that it's going to, it just they draw our eye because they're little spots down there. And they just, they draw our eye. And so, well, I guess I ended up doing them all anyway. Okay, there you go. So when we see that before and after, we've gone from that to this, and I think it's just cleaned up a little bit, Sue.
Yes, sweet. I like that.
Awesome, good. All right, Chris, I'm going to send it on back to you.
Thank you.
Oh, you bet, Sue.
Okay. Okay. Steve or Steven?
Hello. Either way.
Either way. What do you prefer?
Steve is fine.
Steve is fine. Okay. So tell me about this image. How did you create this?
All right. So this was my backyard, pointed east. So that tree line's off to the east on my property. I shot that, but of course the Milky Way there is crap. So I just turned the camera to the south and angled it vertical to get the core of the Milky Way. And then the Milky Way, this was on the Move Shoot Move Star Tracker. So I had 4 shots at 2 minutes each, stacked.
Okay.
And then blended with the trees for the foreground.
Wow. Okay. So you used a Star Tracker and stacking.
Yes.
Wow. That's pretty hardcore. Yeah. Cause I
saw
this.
You see all the detail.
Yeah. I saw this, 4,000 plus seconds. And I was kind of wondering, I figured there was some kind of stacking going on, but you did 2 things. Cool. I just got my hands on one of those. I haven't gotten a chance to try it yet because we've had moonlight.
Yes.
But I'm hoping to next week. Okay. So, all right. So this is a composite with the tree line and then Milky Way off in the distance. Where do you live?
Southern Alabama.
Okay. All right. And how
Bordeaux
dark
4.
is it there?
Bordeaux 4. So it's dark.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll start by saying, so a Milky Way that's this dramatic isn't my thing, but I'm not going to say it's wrong either. This is why I was asking you, how you did it and what you were going for. Because if this was your artistic goal, then bravo, you nailed what you were trying to do. I usually try to make my Milky Ways look, like a little punched up, but, closer to how they look when you're out there. But I want to go with what you were trying to do, because you did do, I think you did a good job on again, achieving the goal that you had, right? And I'm looking at the histogram too, and everything's in here. This is a good looking histogram. And I'm looking at this and I'm trying to think, okay, there's changes that I would make if it was my photo, but again, they're not what you were trying to do. So I'm trying to look at this in terms of what you were shooting for, and I'm not sure I would change much. I love these star points in here. It's pretty sharp. Look at how sharp this is. There's so much detail to look at.
That's what you get with a star tracker.
Yeah. And the darkness in here, and how are the trees? The trees are being lit by something, or is this just from a long exposure?
From the neighbors.
Okay. The light on the trees is just a little bit flat, but you can't control it unless you underexposed it and tried to light paint it. It's a lot to light paint, though, to try to get in here and do that evenly or to do something creative with it. But it doesn't look bad. I'm just looking for something that I can offer.
I don't normally do astro landscapes. I normally do deep space, and that's why I wasn't sure.
Oh, okay.
Good as a landscape. Yeah.
Yeah.
Normally my stuff's all punchy like that, and it's bringing out nebulas.
All right. Yeah. And again, I always draw a separation between what I do and what somebody else is trying to do. I don't need everybody to do what I do. So if this is what you're going for, then I don't know how to say it other than that. It's not how I would shoot it, but what I'm looking at is stunning. So I enjoy what you've produced here.
Chris, can I jump in for a second? Can you zoom in, take your mouse down a little bit more? Yeah, right there. Zoom in there.
What you looking at?
Yep. Can you go to 1:1 if that is?
Pretty sure it is. Yeah, it's 1:1.
Okay. So, yep. Nope. It's perfect right there. So, Steve, you did a really pretty good job of masking in. So the tree shot was made separately from the one that was obviously made on the move, shoot, move, right?
Yes.
Because the trees would be blurry. Okay. So you masked them in and you did a really good job. The only thing I would say is that I think you could soften up the edges a little bit. Did you do, obviously you did that in Photoshop, I'm guessing, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah. So once you've made that mask, what I would do is I would go in and either feather that mask ever so slightly or do a couple of different moves by like clicking on that mask and going up to filter other, and then, I'm trying to think. Kathy, help me out here. Is that, filter other, minimum, maximum. And what that will do is the minimum and maximum. Can you see my hands, Steve? Okay, so if you go to minimum, what it'll do is it'll take the edge of that mask and pull it in. And if you take maximum, it'll take the edge of the mask and pull it out. And when you do that move combined with a feather on that mask, what it does is it moves the mask by like a pixel or two in one direction or the other. And then when you feather, it makes a real believable look to it. And you can't do that just by going into your mask feathering. So the only way to do it is filter other, minimum or maximum, and that will give you that realistic edge, because it's just a little hyper real with the sharpness on that edge.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'd say is maybe just darken the trees down a little bit. We understand we're looking at a deep space image, and to have the trees that bright is a little bit, it looks a little bit false. And so by darkening them down, it'll look much more like a realistic image. So cool shot.
Hey, Tim?
Yeah.
The maximum minimum thing is what we did ages and ages ago. Have you used the refine mask, refine selection sliders for that kind of change these days, or does maximum and minimum work differently?
Yeah, the problem is that when you're doing that, you can't do it individually to a small selected area, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
You know, so some of those areas and those trees look very realistic, but some of them looked a little fake. So you can go in with a 20% feather on your selection tool, and then just do the min max on that area. So the mask could have different amounts of min max, and they've never fixed that. So the overall masking still it's great. It's a great improvement, but it's not quite as good as the old method. Isn't that crazy?
No, that's totally cool. I get that. There's still some things I like to do the old way too.
Yeah. All right. I need to change my headphones, you guys, real quick. So bear with me because my headphones have just gone out. So 1 second.
Okay. While Tim's doing
talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. While Tim's doing that, Kathy, I'll answer the question you asked on the chat. I was just typing it out. So Kathy had asked, going back to the dark frame subtraction, if darken mode with the layer would accomplish the same thing. And it actually wouldn't. I could see where you'd think it might, but what the darken mode does is it looks for the darkest pixel across the layer, and it brings the darkest pixel forward. So in the case of this example, what would happen is the whole image would end up dark. What the subtract mode does is it's only affecting the light pixels. So it's going to find those light pixels and replace only those with the dark pixel that's underneath it. It's a little hard to verbalize the difference, but if you go in and try it, you'll see exactly what will happen.
Okay, so that's interesting because I was thinking, well, we use lighten when we want to stack up a bunch of stars. So darken is the opposite of that. And why wouldn't it work in that situation? But I suspected that it might darken everything. So
yeah. If you think about the parts of the image that were illuminated, like the smokestacks, with the dark frame, that was all black. So that black portion is going to come forward and obscure those smokestacks.
That's interesting. That's one of those new blend modes they've added, and so I've never used that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, it was a good question. I had to think about it for a couple seconds when you asked. So. Okay. Tim, can't hear you. Do you maybe need to change the mic setting in
how's that? Is that better?
Yeah, there you are.
I hit the wrong button when I went to change the mics. Okay, cool. So I will share and see who we have up next here. And this is Hadley.
Hey, Tim.
Cool, fun. Is this your backyard?
This is the backyard, having fun.
Oh man, that's awesome. I love it. All right. So tell me, how the heck did that stay still for a star trail shot of at least 30 or 40 minutes?
It's a 3-point tie down with fishing line.
Oh my God, that is so clever.
I don't think you can see.
That is so clever.
And it was not windy.
Okay. And so, well, look at this. We're even getting the star trails in here. So this is a star stack?
It is a star stack of a little over 200 stacks. One of them was light painted.
Okay. So, wow. Well, your light painting looks very natural here. I'm seeing, maybe a little bit on the hat here. Did you light paint the hat? And then maybe here a little bit too?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is just a touch bright, but I'm glad they're brighter because you're bringing attention to it. So you're making the statement of saying, hey, this is about the hats, crossing over the pool. So by making them brighter, I think that was the right tack, the right tack to take. I would say maybe just darken those down a little bit. So in that particular frame, Hadley, how familiar are you with Photoshop?
Not very familiar. I use it a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Okay. So the way I would approach this is in Photoshop for that particular layer, I would just go ahead and mask that out and make it a little bit darker. Here in Lightroom, you could do the same thing when you come back by using a local adjustment brush. And looks like you already have. You've done some local adjustments, haven't you?
Well, not on the hat, but.
Okay, so you did darken that down though, and that's awesome because if you guys notice, if I take this off, you'll see what it looked like before. You see that? So this has gotten opened up with all of Hadley's local adjustments, and this has gotten darkened down. So one more time, off, and then on. And you can see that I think what you did with your local adjustments was right on the mark. So I would just go in and darken them down each a little bit more. So if that's the hat, you know, is that the hat? Yeah. Yeah. Just bring that down a little bit. Oh, you brought them up a little bit.
I went back and forth, to be honest with you, but your feedback is helpful because what I hear you telling me is that for those two hats, it strikes you as still a little bit too bright.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the overall sense of the frame, what you've done in the direction you've taken, I think is right on the mark. I would say just take those hats and darken them down just a touch. They're already a singular small shape in there that are somewhat bright. And I think that's going to be enough to give us the clue of where to look without having the extra brightness in there.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm really glad you went in and brightened up in here. I think that's good. And this is a key right here. The fact that you darken that down is really key. And the only other thing I would say is let's take that darkening down and spread it out even a little bit more into this area. You know, to kind of, and that was a bit heavy handed. So maybe I should have painted at 50% opacity or flow there. But that idea of kind of drawing that darkness down so we're not quite seeing as much of this area bringing us in. You know, we want to be brought into the photograph, but I think this is a strong enough draw. And so ultimately I want to see this a little bit darker. So ultimately what I'm saying is if we grabbed like a gradient tool, you know, and brought it up like this and just darkened that down somewhat, then it's a little bit darker here than it is there. And that's all I'm trying to get at there. And let's see what else. You know, I keep going back and forth with this area up here, Hadley, the tree. The inclusion of it certainly elongates our trails and we see more sky, but it adds like another thing to look at here.
Yeah.
Let me just try this.
I brought it down a little bit, but.
Yes, you did. Yes. Let me just try it. Whoops. Sorry about that. Nope. Okay. It's locked. Let me take my lock off. And I'm just going to try this and see how that feels. You know, if it was me, Hadley, I think I would do that. I really do. It's not as much about the sky now, but and it's a creative decision. I think it can go either way, but yeah, that to me looks cleaner now. But I totally see why you'd want to put it in there though. You know, I mean, that's pretty cool seeing all that sky. And it's amazing that you're able to get that in a backyard and everything looks nice and sharp up there. Yeah, great job. Chris, do you want to add anything? Does that feel? Oh, you're muted, Chris. Sorry, buddy.
No, I see your point about the crop, and that is a tough call because it does become less about the sky. And you know, the sky was clearly important to you because you did this long exposure to get the star trails. So it's a different image this way. You know, it's about something different this way. Hadley, how do you feel about it, about the crop?
I went back and forth on it. I thought about cropping it as Tim did. And frankly, I decided not to, just because I wanted a little bit more of the sky in there. It seemed like it to me, it was more appealing, but I think it's an artistic call. You could go either way.
Yeah.
I just liked a little more of the stars.
You know, I had another layer to that. It's an artistic call, but it's also a call of what story are you telling? Because you know, with the sky cropped out, the story is about the pool entirely. You know, and that starry background becomes you know, a secondary subject in the composition. So, you know, are you telling a story of night, or are you telling a story of pool, and it happens to be at night? So I think that's an important consideration too, on deciding whether to crop this. What is the photo about for you?
Well, for me, it's the latter. It's really about the pool as it exists in the night. If I crop out too much of the stars, then it becomes just about the pool, and that's less dimensional for me than trying to include more of the stars.
Well, in that case, Hadley, you know what my suggestion would be is, you know, because you see the point about the crop clearly, because you tried it, is reshoot this with that in mind. You know, find a way to frame this so that you can get more night sky in it without the distraction of that one more tree, and get the balance of subjects that you like. Because I think you're onto a great idea here, and you executed it really well. And yeah, I mean, go perfect it. Go nail what you were trying to do.
Yeah, it's it's a real good idea. Hadley, is there any way you can move to the right a little bit and then swing your camera back left, and then perhaps include a little bit more of your house?
Well, I played with that, and I felt that was a distraction. I tried to exclude as much of the house as I could, except for the far end of the house down there, which you can see.
Yep.
Well, one other suggestion: do you have a chainsaw?
Well, I do, but it's on the neighbor's property.
Well, yeah, but you're working at night; they won't know.
Get rid of that loblolly. Nicely done, Hadley. Really.
Yeah,
nice.
That's a cool
really
image.
Good. Yeah, really good. Nicely executed.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Joe. Okay, where's this one? Joe, are you muted?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, it's all right.
No, this is Skyline Drive. Shenandoah, once again. I'm looking back in the other direction.
Okay. Do you live nearby?
Yeah, I live outside Washington, D.C.
Okay. All right. So it's relatively easy for you to get to.
It's about a 2-hour drive each way.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Again, it's do you enjoy working the urban into the landscape?
I don't know if I necessarily enjoy it, but it's just one of those things where it's there. And like one of the questions that I kept kind of going back and forth on was with this, obviously a star stack, was the sort of greenish light in the bottom left corner. Do I try and clone that out or get rid of it, or do I?
This right here.
Yeah, it seemed like it was. I don't know if it's really adding anything other than that it kind of gives a little bit of depth maybe to the image, that I'm up on the mountain looking down, and if there's stuff in here, it's not just a void.
Yeah, it gives a little context. Well, the reason I asked about if you liked it is because it's the second image we saw like that. It's one of the tricky things about shooting in Shenandoah is you've got these beautiful vistas, but more than half of them are looking over a town or some kind of community or something. You've got to find those north and south facing overlooks to avoid that. But if you like shooting this kind of landscape, it's a great place to do it, to get these aerial views over the valley. This, when I first saw it, this is the first thing I saw. It's a point of high contrast that's sort of away from everything else in the composition. It does pull your eye down. I don't think you could just get rid of it, because then I think the bottom of the frame is going to be too black. So I think you've got to make the choice between whether to keep it. And if you do keep it, at least that's not too close to the edge of the frame. It's not too close to the corner. It's not pulling your eye out completely, right? So it's not in a terrible spot. So I think you can get away with keeping it, but maybe tone it down a little so it's not attracting so much tension. And alternatively, you could decide to crop it out. I mean, let's see. Like, I mean, this doesn't look like an easy crop though, because you're going to lose so much. I mean, that's not terrible. That's kind of pano now. So if that bothers you, you could maybe pull in a little bit to get a little closer to the 2x3 again. Okay. I might do that if it was my photo. I think that's an improvement. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, at the time I was, I think, trying to get a little bit of the grasses in the very foreground in, but
yeah,
since there's besides the grass and that one light, there's not much else.
Right, you're talking about this grass right here.
Yeah. So enough, other than that, there's, it's really the crop you had sort of focuses more on the, what's in the background in the town cars, and that's really,
yeah, and that's what I was going for, trying to crop to reveal the primary points of interest, right? Which is the stars and the town. But again, it might not be what you're going for. I do think in this particular case it works a little bit better, and similar to before, like I see the grass. Did you light paint to reveal this?
I think I tried to light paint a little bit, and then as this, after a couple of minutes, because this was a 40-minute stack.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night, I went and hopped back in the car, took a nap.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell what else is here, but I mean, it looks like at least this part is pretty far down. So I don't know how much grass was right in the foreground, but it looks like it might have been kind of hard to light paint enough to create visual interest here.
Yeah.
If this whole section of the photo was really important to you, again, I can't see what's in here. If there's some beautiful rolling hills and a red barn and all that. Another approach you could take is to shoot at twilight to get this foreground, a little bit of exposure in the foreground, and then wait the hour for it to get dark and don't move the camera, and then shoot your star stack. That's more of a commitment, but light photography is a commitment to begin with, right? So why not throw in the extra hour? And when did you shoot this around the same time?
No, this was a few months later.
Okay. All right. I was noticing, it looks like it might be a meteor in July. It could be. But I don't see, does this bother you, or do you like that it's there? Or?
I never noticed it, actually.
Yeah. And then there's a few more in here. Sorry?
I think it was close to a meteor shower.
Late July. Yeah. There's sort of a crossover between the Perseids and the ones right before it is the Aquarids. Is that right? So neither of them are at peak, but you could get them from either one at that point. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing I would try to take out, but I don't have any problem with leaving it in either. At least it's not in a spot where it's killing your composition. Like if it was a really long one up in the corner of the frame, then it would be distracting. But here it's not bad. I did notice when I zoomed in, it looks like you got a plane right here.
No.
And you see the dots. It looks like it was a high altitude plane. Again, if it doesn't bother you, no big deal. I tend to clone those things out. But nice job on the stack, and I think it did a nice job on the processing. I think there's a lot of punch in the sky without it being overwhelming. So I think it executed really well. So nice job.
Yeah, good job, Joe. All right. And Bannock, Kath? Is that it looks, I think that's Bannock Ghost Town. Kathy, did you have any
yes.
Particular questions about this photograph?
No, it's another light painting composite It is
Oh, okay.
Bannock. I didn't feel like this was one of my more successful ones. It was one of the last ones that I did. And my challenge was that the front of the building, you know, there's glass in the windows.
Right.
And so when I was like painting the fence, I was getting reflection from my flashlight in the windows that I've cloned out.
Yes.
So, and also I had to stand farther away from this building than the picture I showed last week where I was doing light painting on a series of buildings. So, you know, I didn't have a very powerful flashlight. It's just a normal everyday kind of flashlight.
Gotcha.
And the light on the left side of the building is actually moonlight.
Gotcha. Yep.
And so I tried to like shine light on the chimney. So I know I painted the front and I painted the fence and I painted the boardwalk. I like how the clouds came out, but I guess I needed a more powerful flashlight. I'm not really sure what.
I think so. Yeah, because you're at a 2-minute exposure here. So you've only got so much time to paint, during a 2-minute exposure. So a more powerful flashlight would have helped with that. And some of the ones that we're using are pretty darn powerful, but it's also nice to have really weak ones too for certain things. So that's kind of why you have 2 or 3 flashlights. But I would say overall your approach was good. I want to take, since this is a full moon night, I want to take this to get it a little bit bluer. And I think that's going to accomplish 2 things. One, it's going to make the sky feel a little bit less cyan. And so as we start to bring our temp down, you see that sky starting to feel just a little bit more blue. Then I'm going to actually put in just a couple hints of magenta, not too much, +2. Now, as we look at that sky, it just seems to be, to me, a kind of I like the color better. It seems like a little flat and kind of here and there. It just seems to be, I don't know, a little bit more of the blue that I prefer. But what that also does is it also gives a bluer feeling to the light around the buildings, and it's a ghost town. So, having it feel more blue is kind of okay, right? Have you considered black and white for it too?
Oh, no, I did not think of that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's pretty killer. But there are 2 main things that I want to talk about here. One is this spot here on the fence is really bright and drawing our eye. And I would really like to see it to be about the same brightness as the rest of those fence posts. So, while you're out in the, while you're out working and painting, and looking at the back of your frame, you're going to try to even that out with the, with your flashlight, because we don't want to have to do it when we come back here. It's always easier to do it in the field, as you know. But yeah, bringing down the whites on that and evening that fence out a little bit is going to draw our attention more into here. So then with our flashlight, what we start to do is, let me just add a new mask here, Kathy. What we start to do is we start to say, where do we want the viewer to look? Right. So, maybe the walkway in that door. So going in and brightening up that door with your flashlight again is going to, obviously draw your attention there. So how much? Well, you just, you play with it until it gets a little bit more realistic. So those are the types of things I would do with the actual flashlight itself, is to try to say, these are the areas I want to highlight. Okay. The other thing is that a sky like this over a 2 or 3 minute exposure really can benefit from a lot of dehaze. Now, if we put too much dehaze in, it's going to alter the feel of the building. But let's just watch what the dehaze does to the sky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty killer, right? The problem with the dehaze is that it may, as I say, adversely affect, some of these other tones in here. And in this case, I don't know that it did, but it does feel a little crunchy, right? It's a little overall too crunchy. So in that case, what you do is you go back in and, with a paintbrush, or a, a range mask and a gradient filter or something, you go in and add that same amount of dehaze and then just basically paint in the sky here. And I'll just do one side so we don't take too much time. You can see if you don't treat it with kid gloves, it gets really ugly really quick. Oh, I can never help myself. I just got to do the whole bloody thing. All right. So clearly, you want to be gentle with that dehaze, but even a little bit like that. And what I almost always find is that whenever I increase the dehaze, I'm almost always decreasing the saturation too. And that will give you the structure in the sky without the overall increase in saturation that accompanies that dehaze filter or that dehaze slider. So
you would try to do that in Lightroom as opposed to, for example, taking it into Photoshop, so you could make a better selection around the building and then using the camera raw filter to make the dehaze on the sky?
That would be the best way to do it. Absolutely. That would be the best way to do it. Yeah, for sure. That's above the pay grade of most folks, but yes, that's the perfect way to do it. Yeah. Cause you want that dehaze slider, and there's no dehaze slider in Photoshop. It only exists in camera raw. So you got it. Yep.
And then that prevents the top, the top part of the building right underneath the roof from getting super, super dark in there. When you crunch that dehaze down, it really hits the chimney in that part of the building.
Yep. And I could say this could even be toned down a little bit, in my opinion. It's just a hair too bright.
Okay.
So, I would probably bring this section down anyway, because I'm glad you painted it. I think that was a good idea, but it may have gotten just a little too bright with the painting. So, so we could just take that down a little bit. Well, I'm not sure what's happening. Did I move to a different pin? But at any rate, you get my point. I would take this section right in here and darken that down a little bit. And that, again, is going to bring out more attention into here. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was challenging to paint it because, there's the fence and I think there's a little merry-go-round on one side of the sidewalk that goes up to the door. And then there's like bushes on the other side. And I was worried about the windows. And so there was like, I can't paint from here. I can't paint from there. I'm not sure where I can paint from. Another question I had was when you talked about painting the door, how do you keep that from spilling over and not getting yourself in the picture, right? That becomes a challenge.
Yeah. So what you would do is you would take I was just looking to see if I had it handy here, but like a tube, like a longer tube, like a paper towel tube or something, put your flashlight inside of it. And then that kind of acts as a snoot for the light. And you could just go, like pop into those areas and just add a little brightness into those individual areas. Cause if I remember correctly, you can't cross that fence, right?
I don't remember.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a trick, but just remember, you're free to walk through that frame. Just keep that light hidden from the camera and walk all through there if you want. So don't worry about being seen. You're not going to be seen.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Tim. That sky is amazing.
Yeah. Good old dehaze filter, right? Whew. So cool. All right. I'm going to send her on back to you, Chris.
Okay. All right. Where are we? Okay, this is Christina.
Yep.
How you doing?
Good.
All right. Where 285 seconds. Is this a stack?
Yeah, it's backed in Sequator.
Okay. All right, great.
Cool.
Where'd you shoot this?
A lake called Clear Lake up in the Cascades in Oregon where we live.
Okay. My mom lives on Clear Lake, but it's in Connecticut.
Different Clear Lake.
Yeah, that's a different Milky Way too. Okay. What's going on back here? Is this
campfire?
It is. I was going to say it looks like a fire. Okay, so it's a campfire. So keep it. All right. All right. So the I mean, obviously the first thing I notice is the Milky Way, but then I I see this tree. Were you including this for a compositional reason or?
Yeah, I really liked the branches, but I tried a lot of different kinds of crops with this.
Okay. I just want to see. Okay. Here's the original. Nope. Okay. Yeah, that's tough. Just because there's so much going on. There's so much going on up in here, you know. So like, I almost find it. I mean, it's kind of distracting for me instead of helping the composition. But it looks like it was probably really hard to get a different angle, right?
Yeah, I would have been swimming in the lake for a different angle.
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes you got to commit to getting wet, right? All right. Okay. But I mean, I see what you were going for. You know, sometimes we have a great idea, and if it's just not working out, you know, sometimes it's best to just abandon it. Yeah, it's just a bit. It's because I don't see a way that it would be easy to get an angle where you could sort of separate. You know, we've got all this convergence here of this branch and these trees in the background, and it looks like these branches with maybe some branches of another tree up here or something. But the silhouette's nice and crisp. You know, so you executed that part well. I'm wondering, there's something else I just spotted here. So you did this in Sequator. It looks a little bit soft, and look at this. Is this a plane coming through? It's not lining it up. Probably, can you see that? Like it's just a little jagged. It's like it pushed it off to the right a little bit on each frame. So I'm wondering if you took another pass with this, if there's a way to adjust the alignment, and that might make the stars a little sharper. Because you see, they're just a bit soft here. It's like there's a little bit of motion.
Yeah.
I would go in and just see if you can adjust that. You have all the original files?
Not sure.
Okay. If you do, you might want to go take another crack at that, and see if there's an adjustment in there. You can pull the alignment of the stars back in. So, all right, so in Sequator, so you needed to identify this as all foreground material, right? I mean, you had to mask this foreground?
Right.
Yeah, well, good job with that. I mean, because I know that's not easy with the trees and all these branches. So, in terms of the rest of the composition, I love the reflection. I mean, this is not always easy getting a reflection in the Milky Way. And you pulled it off because you did get so much nice detail in the highlights in here. And I like that a lot. I do wonder if you could get a little bit more punch. You know, this histogram looks good on the right here. It almost looks like it's blowing out a little bit in the middle, but, you know, like it looks kind of hot, but I don't see that in the histogram. But I just wonder, you know, we've talked about dehaze a few times, and you can see the punch that's adding to the sky, and maybe just a tiny bit of texture. And again, this looks hot, but I don't know. Yeah, you see, like, even if it's not recovering much in here. Like, yeah, it does look good in the histogram, but you could maybe, you know, get in here and do a local adjustment and see if there's a little bit of detail in here you could recover. But I mean, that's not ruining the image. I mean, this is, you know, it looks really nice. And I like a lot of what's going on here and in the lake and the silhouette of the skyline. And I love that this is a fire. I was going to say it looks like a fire, but it actually is. So it's telling the story. And even though it's a bright spot, I wouldn't touch it. It's kind of falling nice compositionally right along this line is bringing your eye to it. And I don't think it's big enough to be competing with the Milky Way. So yeah, that was a nice inclusion. That was a good choice. Oh, really pretty night sky up there. I haven't spent enough time in Oregon. I hope to get up there before too long and see what you're saying. Yeah,
it's a good place to be.
Weird about that. Okay.
Yeah, that's about an hour from our house.
Sorry, say that again.
That's about an hour and a half from our house.
Okay. All right. Oh, it's a pretty spot.
Yeah, truly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and last up we have Sue. Cool. Sue, what's your question on this?
Okay, this is my first attempt at doing the meteor composition and everything. So I actually had like 4 places I was going to try and get these that night, and all 4 of them I went down farther south, and it was all foggy and cloudy. So I headed back north, and this was kind of a last minute, oh, let's go here and everything. This is just above Brush Lake in Boundary County. But my question is what are those things in the brightest ones in the upper right? I'm pretty sure they're not meteors, but you know, they showed up in one picture, and then I did compositionally wise, added the other parts of it.
Okay, cool. So you added some of these other meteors from different exposures. Cool.
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that, Chris. I know Chris probably knows, or could take a better stab at it than I do.
It's a little bit of, I mean, the thing it looks closest to is an Iridium satellite, but I don't know why there'd be 3 like that. And what I'm wondering is if they're the Starlink satellites, because those are launched in groups. So if you had 3 show up in the same exposures, that would be my guess, only because I know they just launched a group. What happens is they launch like 60 at a time, and as they orbit, they separate into the locations they're supposed to be.
Whoa.
That's my best guess.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, I just didn't know. I thought, well, man, that was cool. But then I thought, I don't think they're meteors, but I like it, you know, and everything. And I think the gap is, this was, I think on my Canon 5 Mark, 5D Mark 4 or whatever.
Yep.
You know, and I think that's why I'm getting the gap in them.
They were in 1 frame, not 2 frames?
Those are 3 frames. Well, actually, I don't know how many pictures are taken.
Well, I mean, just these, I mean, because the gap to me, my first thought would usually be that the gap was between 2 exposures, that was the second that the intervalometer was
yes,
resetting,
that's what it is.
Okay, so that would be really unlikely to happen during a meteor, right? Because a meteor happens like that. So this was something that was traveling more slowly. The reason I thought Iridium at first is because this is sort of the light pattern of an Iridium satellite, where it's very dim and then you get this big shine, which is when the sun hits off the solar panel. The thing is that there's only like 6 Iridium satellites still up there, and they're not all together. So that's why I don't think that, that's what this is.
And everything. So yeah, and they were like, it was like a 17-second or 21-second, I can't remember which I did, on the exposures.
Yep, 19
you know,
seconds.
And they were, and there were 3 pictures that had this that I compiled them together. I apologize for being a JPEG, because when I went to do a DNG, it was like 165, you know, and it wouldn't take it, obviously. And I didn't know how to make it smaller or do it, you know, so I could send it as a DNG.
Sure.
So
no, it's all good. It's all
you
good.
know. So, but like I said, it's my first attempt. It's not the best composition. I got up there and I thought, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And,
yeah. Well, I think it turned out really well. I would say, as far as, you know, processing, you can consider a little bit of the bump up in whites, and those whites are always going to make that, you know, make everything jump out a little bit more. Not only the Milky Way here, you know, but also the satellites and the meteors themselves. And so if you look at the before and after of those whites, I mean, all I did was touch the white slider, you know, and maybe a few points of dehaze, not too terribly much, you know, like 13, and maybe bringing that, adding a little bit more blue into the sky there by lowering the temperature just a touch. Yeah, and then let's see. So now you've gone from from here to there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so that was an increase in the whites, a very slight increase in dehaze, only 9 points. Yeah, and then just slight a little bit of color temperature blue, moving that temp towards the blue slider, or moving that towards the left. And I think that's really pretty cool.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I just appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to try one other thing just for fun. Just wondering if that. Yeah. I just tilted you saw what I did, right?
Yes.
I just tilted a little bit. And I think by doing that, it helps eliminate this tree down here, which we can go in and get rid of later, but it kind of brings these trees out of the corner and points up that way a little bit more.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and then you go in and, just remove a few of these little trees down in here. And then it's going to be, where did that one go? Why did it go up there? Okay. But yeah, so now it looks a little bit more clean on the bottom, and it has those trees somewhat pointing up towards the satellites themselves.
Yeah.
And
Sweet.
I might even take that down a little from the top. And I think that will help. By doing that, we're going to sort of do what we call disturb the edges a little bit. Have these, that was a little too much, but we don't want the people to fall out of the sky up ahead. So by putting them closer to the corner, we're kind of going between these things, which actually makes this one seem a little bit more obvious. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's like down on the lower left corner in the trees. That's a plane.
Yep, and I would probably take that out. I really think I would.
Yeah,
and that would, in a place like this is where I'll often use the clone stamp tool, because if you go straight through it, it could mess it up. So what I'll do is I'll come over and take my clone and clone a bit of this branch. Whoops. Right here over top. Whoops, I just did the opposite of what I wanted to do. Yeah, there we go. No, that's not at all working the way I wanted it to. There we go. That's a little bit better.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And now I would do the same thing with a clone very close to this. I'll just click it here, but then push it up underneath that area. Whoa, my Lord. I don't know what happened there. Go back. So we're taking this one and just moving it up ever so slightly underneath. And now what I'll do is go to the heel and then just kind of drag through with the healing brush, and see if that does a pretty good job. And it very well may. Yeah, and that's fine. And I think that's going to also clean up the bottom of that image and really point us upward. So that was a good eye that you saw that, Sue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. So that was it. We got everybody right, I do believe. And wow, awesome work, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Anybody have any questions before we sign out? I
have a chainsaw if those people need one. Take those trees out.
Good on you, Sue. Good on you.
Today was the last supermoon, right?
Yes.
Yep, it was a
earlier today.
The last one. Yep. Yep. I'm missing it. But well, all right, everybody. Again, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. That gives us a chance to say hi. It's good to see your faces. And
yeah.
Well,
thank you guys for doing this with us.
You're so welcome.
That's awesome.
Thanks for coming.
Welcome. Yeah. Oh, do we do a screenshot here? I think does he pull that off of the feed? Yeah, I think we all gotta wave at the camera. I think we're doing groupie screenshots. See you guys.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, guys.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye.